Samantha was driving down a winding, deserted road, the autumn leaves swirling in the breeze. It was a perfect day. The sun was warm, the air crisp, and the radio played her favorite songs. She had just left a weekend retreat, feeling refreshed and at peace, when a sudden thump disrupted the moment. Her car jolted slightly, and the unmistakable sound of a flat tire echoed in her ears. "No, no, not now," she groaned, glancing at her dashboard. The nearest gas station was miles back, and her phone's signal had dropped to 0 bars a while ago. She carefully pulled the car to the side of the road, trying not to panic. Stepping out, Samantha examined the rear tire and sighed. Completely flat. She opened her trunk and stared at the tools she hadn't used in years. The jack, the spare tire, the wrench, they all felt foreign, almost mocking in their simplicity. Samantha knew she could figure it out, but the idea of fumbling around on the side of the road wasn't appealing. Still, she had no choice. As she knelt by the tire, struggling to fit the jack under the car, she heard the rumble of an engine behind her. She stood up quickly, turning to see a silver truck slowing down as it approached her. Her heart skipped a beat, both in relief and slight anxiety. She wasn't sure if she wanted a stranger stopping, but she was too desperate to wave them off. The truck came to a stop, and out stepped a man, tall, with sun-kissed skin and dark, tousled hair. His rugged good looks, complete with a charming smile, made Samantha's breath hitch slightly. "Need some help?" he called out, walking over with an easy stride. Samantha brushed a strand of hair from her face, feeling suddenly self-conscious.
Yeah.
"I think so. I have a flat and I was trying to change it, but—" "Say no more," he interrupted with a grin, glancing down at the tire. "I've got this. I'm Will, by the way." "Samantha," she replied, feeling a mix of gratitude and nervousness. Will gave her a nod and immediately got to work, kneeling down to assess the situation. "You are doing fine, by the way," he said, shooting her a reassuring look. "But it's always nice to have a helping hand." She smiled, leaning against the car, watching him work. There was something calming about his presence, his confidence, the way his hands moved with ease, like he had done this 100 times before. "Do you live around here?" she asked, making conversation to distract herself from the awkwardness of standing by uselessly. Will glanced up briefly, his eyes meeting hers. "Not too far. I was just heading home from a job when I saw you. Figured I couldn't leave someone stranded out here." Samantha nodded, grateful. "Yeah, this road is pretty quiet. I wasn't sure anyone would come by." Will chuckled. "Well, lucky for you, I'm here." He tightened the last bolt on the spare tire and stood up, brushing his hands on his jeans. "There you go. Good as new." Samantha blinked, impressed by how quickly he had taken care of it. "Thank you so much. I don't know what I would have done without you." "No problem at all," he said, giving her that easy smile again. "Just glad I could help." As he packed away the tools and shut her trunk, Samantha found herself lingering, not wanting the moment to end just yet. There was something about Will, something more than just his looks. He was kind, unassuming, and despite the brief encounter, she felt a strange sense of comfort around him. "Are you sure I can't do something to thank you?" she asked, feeling like she owed him more than just gratitude. Will hesitated for a moment, then shrugged with a playful grin. "How about a coffee sometime? There's a great little cafe not too far from here." Samantha felt a flutter of excitement at his suggestion. "That sounds nice." "Good," he said, pulling a pen from his pocket and scribbling his number on a scrap of paper. "Call me if you get another flat or, just for that coffee." Samantha took the paper, her smile widening. "I might just do that." With a final wave, Will climbed back into his truck and drove off, leaving Samantha standing by her car, the crisp autumn air swirling around her. She stared down at the paper in her hand, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun overhead. Maybe, she thought, getting a flat tire wasn't so bad after all. Samantha stepped into her luxury apartment, the familiar scent of home enveloping her as she set her keys down on the marble countertop. The panoramic windows that stretched across the living room gave her a breathtaking view of the city skyline, the lights twinkling like stars in the night. It was a sight that usually filled her with a sense of accomplishment, a reminder of how far she had come as the CEO of her own company. But tonight, something else was on her mind. She walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, the soft sound of her footsteps barely audible on the sleek wooden floors. Leaning against the cool glass, she gazed out over the bustling city below, her reflection staring back at her. The weekend retreat had been exactly what she needed, a quiet escape from the constant demands of work. The meditation sessions had helped clear her mind, giving her space to reflect and breathe, something she rarely had time for in her fast-paced life. For the first time in months, she had allowed herself to disconnect from the relentless emails, the back-to-back meetings, and the pressure of running a company. She felt lighter now, more centered. But even with her mind clear, one part of the weekend kept playing over and over in her head, her encounter with Will. It was strange, really. A flat tire on a deserted road, a handsome stranger pulling over to help her. It almost seemed like something out of a movie. But Will had been real. His easy smile, his quiet confidence, the way he made her feel completely at ease despite the situation, it had lingered in her thoughts the whole drive back to the city. Samantha glanced at her bag, the memory of Will's number tugging at her. She hadn't thought about calling him at first. After all, she had a demanding life, and the chances of crossing paths with him again seemed slim. But now, standing in her apartment, with the city lights stretching out beneath her, she felt a spark of curiosity. What harm could one call do? She walked over to her bag, pulling out the small piece of paper he had given her. His handwriting was neat, almost careful, as if he had wanted to get it just right. Without overthinking it, Samantha grabbed her phone and dialed the number. The phone rang twice before she heard his voice. Hello. For a moment, she hesitated, caught off guard by how familiar and warm he sounded. Then she cleared her throat, a small smile tugging at her lips. Hey, Will. It's Samantha. There was a pause, then a hint of surprise in his voice. Samantha. From the flat tire, right? I wasn't sure if you'd actually call. She laughed softly, walking back to the window and leaning against the glass. Well, I did promise to call you for that coffee, didn't I? I'm glad you did, he replied, his tone genuine. How's everything been since you got back home? Busy, but nothing new there, she said, glancing around her spacious apartment. I actually live in the city downtown. It's a bit of a contrast to the quiet countryside where you found me. City life, Will said, his voice taking on a thoughtful edge. I don't visit the city often, but I'll actually be there next week for a couple of days. Business trip. Samantha raised an eyebrow, her curiosity piqued. Really? That's perfect timing. Yeah, he chuckled. Seems like the universe might be nudging us toward that coffee after all. Samantha smiled, her heart fluttering just a little. It definitely seems that way. Let me know when you're in town, and I'll make sure to carve out some time in my schedule. I will, he promised. It'll be good to catch up. And this time, I won't have to change a tire to get your attention. Samantha laughed, feeling a surprising sense of excitement as they talked. There was something refreshing about Will. Something that made her feel grounded, even after just a brief encounter. Maybe it was the contrast to her usual world of high-powered executives and endless business demands. He felt real, uncomplicated. They chatted for a few more minutes before saying their goodbyes. As Samantha hung up the phone, she stared out at the city lights once more, her thoughts drifting back to the conversation. A sense of possibility lingered in the air, something she hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to relax. The retreat had done its job, and maybe, just maybe, Will had come into her life at the perfect moment. Samantha sat behind her sleek, modern desk, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she sorted through a mountain of emails. The quiet hum of the city filtered through the large windows of her corner office, but inside, everything was focused, sharp. Her company was thriving, and there was always something that demanded her attention, a decision to be made, a deal to close, a strategy to refine. She paused for a moment, glancing at the clock. 9:45 a.m. Still a few more minutes before her 10 a.m. meeting. She quickly composed a reply to a client and hit send just as her assistant, Emma, knocked softly on the door, and stepped inside. "Samantha, just a reminder that you have a meeting with the contractor for the remodeling at 10. He'll be here any minute." Samantha nodded, her mind briefly shifting from emails to the project. It was a small remodeling job, just an upgrade to one of the break rooms in her downtown office, a place for her team to unwind and recharge. A little thing, but she liked the idea of creating a better space for her employees. Still, with everything else on her plate, she had barely thought about it. The contractor had come highly recommended by her operations manager, and she'd scheduled the meeting, expecting it to be quick and straightforward. "Thanks, Emma," Samantha said, returning her attention to her screen. "Let me know when he arrives." Emma smiled and left the room, leaving Samantha to finish the last of her emails. A few minutes later, another knock sounded at her door. "Your 10 a.m. is here," Emma said, stepping aside to allow the contractor to enter. Samantha looked up, ready to greet whoever walked in, and froze. There, standing in the doorway with that same easy smile, was Will. He paused, clearly just as surprised as she was, before breaking into a grin. "Well, this is a surprise." Samantha blinked, quickly recovering from her shock.
"Will."
He chuckled, stepping further into her office, his hands in his pockets. "In the flesh. I didn't realize you were this, Samantha." She stared at him, still processing the situation. Of all the contractors in the city, of all the remodeling jobs she could have had scheduled, it was him. The man she'd met on the side of the road. The man she'd called just days ago. Emma, sensing the surprise between them, discreetly excused herself, leaving the two alone in the office. "I had no idea you were a contractor," Samantha said, her mind racing. Will shrugged, still looking amused by the coincidence. "I run a small business that handles construction, renovations, that sort of thing. Your office reached out about this project, and I didn't make the connection until now." Samantha let out a soft laugh, shaking her head in disbelief. "What are the chances?" Will smiled, clearly enjoying the twist of fate. "Pretty slim, I'd say. But here we are." For a moment, Samantha felt a ripple of nervousness, something she wasn't used to in her professional life. Here she was, the CEO, sitting across from a man who had helped her change a tire just days ago. But she quickly regained her composure, settling into her usual confident self. "Well," she said, motioning to the chair in front of her desk, "it seems like we were meant to meet again. Let's talk about this project." Will nodded, sitting down with that same laid-back charm he'd had on the side of the road. "Let's." As they dove into the details of the remodeling, Samantha found herself increasingly impressed with Will's professionalism and expertise. He walked her through his vision for the space, offering ideas she hadn't even considered. Despite the unexpected personal connection between them, it was clear he knew his work well. He was calm, thoughtful, and thorough, qualities she appreciated. Yet, as they talked, the conversation kept dipping back into something more casual, more personal. A subtle comment here, a knowing smile there. The easy rapport they'd shared during their first encounter seemed to resurface, lingering in the air between them. When the meeting wrapped up, Will stood, offering his hand. "I'll send over the updated plans later this week. If everything looks good, we can get started next month." Samantha shook his hand, feeling the warmth of his grip. "That sounds perfect." There was a moment of hesitation, as if both of them were thinking the same thing. This was more than just a meeting, more than just business. Before he left, Will glanced back at her with that same playful grin. "By the way, I'm still in town for a couple of days. How about we finally grab that coffee?" Samantha felt her pulse quicken, the hint of excitement sparking through her again. She smiled. "I think I can make time for that." As he left her office, the door softly closing behind him, Samantha leaned back in her chair, staring out at the city's skyline. What had started as a chance roadside encounter was quickly turning into something more. And for once, in her world of schedules, plans, and structure, she welcomed the unpredictability. Over the next few months, Samantha and Will's lives began to weave together in ways neither of them had anticipated. Their relationship blossomed, despite the distance between them. Samantha's fast-paced city life and Will's quiet, grounded existence in the countryside. It was an unlikely pairing, but it worked. During the week, Samantha was the driven CEO, moving from boardrooms to business meetings, her days packed with strategy sessions and deadlines. But her weekends had become something entirely different. She now found herself looking forward to the peaceful drives out to the countryside, where Will lived in a modest yet charming house surrounded by fields and endless skies. The first time she visited, Samantha had been unsure of what to expect. But the moment she stepped out of her car and felt the fresh, crisp air and the quiet, she realized how much she had needed this kind of escape. Will's place felt like a sanctuary, a world away from the towering glass buildings and constant hum of the city. His home was simple, but cozy, filled with the smell of wood and fresh coffee. Will had built a life that was steady, uncomplicated, and she found herself drawn to it. They spent their weekends together wandering through nature, exploring local trails, or simply sitting on Will's porch with a glass of wine, watching the sunset. Will had a way of making the world slow down, of reminding her to breathe, to be present. And in return, Samantha brought a spark of energy and excitement to Will's life, showing him parts of the city he hadn't known existed, taking him to upscale restaurants, art galleries, and even a couple of rooftop parties. Their time in the city was different. When Will visited, Samantha made sure to show him her world, taking him to her favorite spots downtown, introducing him to her friends, and even bringing him to a few corporate events where he, despite his casual nature, held his own with ease. They laughed about how different their lives were, but that difference felt like the glue that held them together. One weekend, after a particularly long week at work, Samantha had driven out to Will's place without her usual sense of urgency. She didn't rush through the drive, allowing herself to soak in the scenery, the changing leaves of autumn. When she arrived, Will greeted her with that warm, familiar smile, pulling her into a tight embrace that instantly melted the stress from her shoulders. "I missed you," she whispered against his chest, breathing in the scent of pine and fresh air that always seemed to cling to him. "I missed you too," Will replied, brushing a kiss against her forehead. "Come on, I have something to show you." He led her down a path that wound through the trees near his house, a spot they often walked through. But today there was something different. As they reached a small clearing, she saw a picnic spread out, blankets, wine, and a basket of food. The soft orange glow of the late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting a golden hue over everything. "You did all this?" Samantha asked, smiling at him in surprise. Will shrugged, a grin playing on his lips. "I figured you could use a break. A real one." Samantha laughed softly, her heart swelling with affection. "You're right. This is perfect." They spent the rest of the day lounging in the clearing, talking about everything and nothing. Will made her laugh with stories from his childhood, and she found herself opening up to him in ways she hadn't with anyone else in a long time. They talked about their different lives, the contrast between her world of high stakes and his world of simple joys, but it never felt like an obstacle. In fact, it felt like balance. As the sun set, painting the sky with vibrant hues of pink and purple, Samantha leaned against Will, her head resting on his shoulder. For the first time in a long time, she felt completely at peace. She didn't need to think about work, about the company, about the next big move. Here, with him, everything else melted away. "I'm glad we found each other," Will said quietly, his voice soft but full of meaning. Samantha smiled, tilting her head up to look at him. "Me too. Even if it took a flat tire to make it happen." Will laughed, pulling her closer. "Fate has a funny way of working." As they sat there, watching the stars slowly appear in the deepening sky, Samantha realized just how much her life had changed since meeting Will. He had brought a sense of calm into her otherwise hectic world, a reminder that there is more to life than work, than constant forward motion. And she, in turn, had brought a new sense of adventure into his. Their lives were still vastly different, but somewhere in between the city lights and the quiet countryside, they had found a rhythm. They had found each other. If you like this story, please subscribe and check out the other stories. Thanks you watching.